Millionaire hid cameras to protect his son, then almost collapsed after seeing the maid by the pool. Nathan Cole returned home earlier than expected on a gray afternoon when the city was still trapped in the heavy breathing of a midweek workday. His luxury car glided through the towering iron gates of the Cole estate, a place once praised as a symbol of power and success, but now resembling nothing more than a cold, lonely fortress, completely cut off from the outside world. According to schedule, Nathan should have been in the air by now, aboard his private jet bound for London to sign a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Everything had been arranged with perfect precision, exactly the way he always controlled his life. But that morning, as he stepped onto the aircraft stairs, a sudden tightness seized his chest. It was not a heart attack, not an illness. It was a vague, heavy premonition, something he could not explain. Nathan turned around, ignored his assistant's stunned gaze, and ordered the pilot to cancel the flight. The mansion welcomed him with its familiar silence, a thick, suffocating silence, as if even the air itself were afraid to make a sound. The cold, white marble floors reflected the soft, golden lights. The towering walls were lined with priceless yet soulless artworks. Everything was perfect, immaculate, luxurious, and completely empty. It had been exactly 1 year since his wife died in a devastating accident. From that day on, Nathan Cole had died in a way as well. The man who once laughed loudly at parties, who once carried his son on his shoulders through the garden, had vanished. What remained was only a cold CEO, a name feared throughout the financial world, and a father who no longer knew what to do with his own child's pain. Lucas, his 1-year-old son, had not made a single sound since the accident. Doctors called it severe psychological trauma. Nathan called it a suspended sentence hanging over his head. This house, once filled with the laughter of a young family, now held nothing but the echo of footsteps along its endless corridors. Nathan removed his coat, loosened his tie, and placed his expensive leather briefcase on the stone table in the grand foyer. He expected nothing but absolute silence. In fact, he had grown accustomed to it. Silence allowed him to avoid facing what he had lost. Nathan Cole stood frozen in the vast foyer, as if taking even one more step might cause that sound to vanish, like a hallucination conjured by his exhausted mind. He held his breath and listened. The laughter came again, not loud, not prolonged, but clear enough, real enough to send a chill down his spine. It couldn't be real. For 12 months, Lucas had not laughed. He had not even made a single complete sound. Europe's finest doctors called it post-traumatic emotional shutdown. Nathan called it a sentence passed down to a father who had let the world collapse in front of his child. He slowly turned, his eyes sweeping across the silent ground floor. No staff, no nurse, no one in the foyer. Only that laughter, echoing from deeper within the house. The faint splashing of water blended with a young, fragile sound so pure it hurt to hear. The conservatory? Nathan's heart pounded so violently he could hear it in his ears. He began to walk, slow at first, then faster, down the long corridor of cold stone. His footsteps echoed evenly, but this time they were no longer the only sound in the mansion. The glass doors leading into the conservatory appeared before him. Natural light poured down through the glass ceiling, casting pale ribbons across the gray stone floor. And just as Nathan placed his hand on the doorframe, the laughter rang out again, clearer, more alive. His hand began to tremble. Nathan pushed the door open. The sight before him made his entire world stop turning. In the sun-filled conservatory, beside a natural stone fountain, a woman was kneeling on the floor. She wore a simple maid's uniform, its colors faded, and cheap yellow rubber gloves on her hands. Her uniform looked painfully out of place amid the luxury of the Cole estate. In her arms was Lucas, his son, the child he had not heard laugh for an entire year. Lucas was soaked from head to toe, soft hair plastered to his forehead, clothes heavy with water, yet his tiny face glowed with an unfamiliar brightness. He was laughing, not a hesitant smile, not a reflexive twitch, but a full, ringing laugh bursting from his small chest, echoing through the glass-walled space. Lucas swung his chubby arms, slapping at the clear water in the fountain, sending droplets flying into the air, sparkling under the sunlight. Each splash made him laugh even louder, his pure sound melting every heart that heard it. "Look, Lucas," the woman whispered, her voice warm like velvet. "The water is dancing." Nathan could not hear every word, but he saw her smiling lips and the way her eyes followed the child's every movement with absolute focus. No phone, no clock, no distraction. Nothing in her world except Lucas. Light fell around them, forming a gentle halo. The contrast was cruelly clear. A child born of a billion-dollar empire and a maid in cheap gloves. Yet she was the one who had brought forth a miracle money could not buy. Nathan's legs went weak. He had to brace himself against the glass frame to keep from collapsing. His throat tightened, his chest aching as if struck by a heavy blow. His eyes burned. The world blurred as tears, emotions he had buried for a year, suddenly broke free. Then, between bursts of laughter, Lucas made another sound. Ma. Weak, unfinished, but devastatingly clear. Time froze. Nathan covered his mouth to keep from making a sound that might shatter the moment, but a soft, broken sob escaped him anyway. The woman playing with Lucas startled and turned around. And her frightened eyes met the stunned gaze of Nathan Cole, the most powerful man in this house. Maya froze when she saw Nathan Cole at the entrance of the conservatory. In that instant, it felt as if all the blood drained from her body. The smile still lingering on her lips vanished, replaced by the pure fear of someone long accustomed to being reprimanded. She lowered her head by instinct, clutching Lucas tightly against her chest as if it were her last reflex to protect the child. The yellow rubber gloves on her hands were still dripping wet, soaked through, looking painfully out of place, almost wrong, amid the elegant surroundings of the conservatory. Sir, Mr. Cole?" Maya's voice trembled, nearly breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just—" She could not finish the sentence. She knew the unspoken rules of this house well. Cleaners were meant to clean. Child care workers were meant to provide care. She was invisible, a shadow that wiped floors and washed glass. She had no right to hold the young master, and certainly no right to leave him soaked in a decorative fountain. Maya braced herself for his fury. But it never came. Nathan did not shout. He did not scold. He did not step forward to snatch Lucas from her arms as she had imagined hundreds of times in her mind. He only stood there, motionless, his gaze locked onto the child in her arms, the child who was looking back at him with shining eyes and smiling. Lucas did not cry at the sight of his father. He did not panic. Instead, he let out a small, giggling laugh and reached toward Nathan, as if recognizing something familiar. That moment shattered the last wall inside Nathan. His knees collapsed onto the cold, wet stone floor. A billionaire, a man the entire city feared, now knelt before a maid in a cheap uniform. His suit, worth tens of thousands of dollars, soaked through. Yet he did not care. He cried, not loudly, not in sobs, just heavy tears rolling down the face that had always been cold and unyielding. "What? What did you do?" Nathan's voice was hoarse, as if torn raw from inside his throat. "What did you do to my son?" Maya was stunned. She had never seen her employer like this. To her, he had always been like a stone statue, tall, distant, emotionless. Now he knelt before her, his shoulders trembling, his eyes desperate, like a man clinging to the last piece of driftwood in a deep sea. I "I didn't do anything special, sir," Maya stammered. "He was placed in a safety chair in front of the television," she continued, her voice small but sincere. "They leave him like that for hours. But children don't need screens, sir. Children need to play. They need to see nature." She drew in a deep breath, gathering the last of her courage. "So I carried him out here, let him touch the water, talked to him, looked into his eyes. That's all." Nathan looked around. Water scattered across the floor. The simple stone fountain. The cheap gloves. Everything was so foreign to his world, yet for the first time in a year he was seeing something real. "The doctors told me my son might never be the same again," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "They told me I had to accept that." Maya lifted her gaze to him. There was no pity in her eyes, no fear, only a steady gentleness. "Perhaps your son doesn't need to be fixed, sir," she said softly. "Perhaps he only needs to be loved." Lucas laughed again and reached out to pat Nathan's cheek as if agreeing. Nathan Cole rose slowly from the wet stone floor, but something in his posture had changed. The icy man was no longer the familiar CEO who lived by command and control. His eyes were still red, yet beneath the exhaustion lay a painful awakening. He looked back at the scene before him, Lucas in Maya's arms, his rare look of ease, water pooled across the floor, the old yellow rubber gloves, the cheap maid's uniform. By every standard of Nathan's life, all of it was out of place. Yet the bitter paradox was this. Together, they had created the most right moment he had experienced in an entire year. "Where is my son's nurse?" Nathan asked, his voice calm again, but sharp and cold, like a freshly honed blade. Maya flinched. She hesitated for a second, then answered softly. "Sir, Mrs. Carter is in the kitchen, drinking coffee. She said the child needs passive stimulation, so she placed him in front of the television." Nathan's jaw tightened. He turned and left the conservatory without another word. Minutes later, Mrs. Carter, the senior nurse with prestigious credentials and a salary others could only dream of, stood before him in the foyer. Nathan did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You are paid to care for my son," he said slowly, "not to place him in front of a screen and call it therapy." Mrs. Carter stammered in defense, citing curricula, methods, and medical standards. Nathan listened, then interrupted. "You're dismissed," he said firmly. "Effective immediately. No negotiation, no second chances." Nathan returned to the conservatory. Maya was still standing there, holding Lucas, her face tense as she awaited her sentence. She was used to being blamed, used to being replaced, used to leaving in silence. But Nathan stopped in front of her. "From this moment on," he said, his voice low but clear, "you will no longer be doing cleaning work." Maya's eyes widened, her heart tightening. "Sir, are you dismissing me?" "On the contrary," Nathan replied. "I will triple your salary. You will receive full medical insurance for both you and your mother. I will arrange a driver if needed." Maya was stunned. She could hardly comprehend what she was hearing. "But I am only a maid." "No," Nathan cut in, his gaze firm but no longer cold. "From today forward, your only duty is to care for Lucas. No one else is to touch my son. Only you." By now, Lucas had rested his head on Maya's shoulder, breathing evenly, completely relaxed. The image struck Nathan's mind like an exclamation point. "I do not need credentials," he continued. "I do not need records. I need my son to laugh, and you are the only one who can make that happen." Maya felt her throat tighten. She lowered her head deeply, tears falling onto her gloves. "Yes, Mr. Cole," she whispered. The large glass doors of the conservatory burst open with a sharp click, shattering the fragile calm that had just been restored. The sound of high heels struck the marble floor, decisive, cold, carrying the confidence of someone who always believed she belonged here. Isabella Reed had arrived. She entered as if the light inside the conservatory had been switched on solely for her. Her blonde hair was impeccably styled, her form-fitting designer dress accentuating her flawless figure, every detail exuding wealth and power. Isabella was the kind of woman accustomed to standing beside successful men, appearing on magazine covers and receiving priority. Always. Her gaze swept over Nathan first, pausing for a brief beat, long enough to register the change in his posture. Then her eyes drifted downward and stopped entirely on Maya. The smile on Isabella's lips vanished. She saw the yellow rubber gloves, the maid's uniform still damp with water, and Lucas, the heir to the coal empire, resting calmly in the arms of someone Isabella had never considered her equal. "What is going on here?" Isabella asked, her voice sharp and high, like a slender blade. Without waiting for an answer, she stepped closer, the expensive perfume overpowering the scent of water in the conservatory. Disgust was plain in her eyes as she looked at Maya. "Why is she holding Lucas?" Isabella said with contempt. "Do you know who you are touching with those gloves?" Maya stiffened by instinct, clutching Lucas closer. She lowered her head, unable to respond as the familiar feeling of smallness and guilt washed over her. She was used to that look, the look that treated her as something dirty to be avoided. "Isabella," Nathan spoke. His voice was not loud, but it was low and firm enough to freeze the air in the room. "Lower your hand," he continued when he saw Isabella about to move closer. "You're frightening my son." Isabella froze. She turned to Nathan, eyes wide, unable to believe what she was hearing. Throughout their relationship, Nathan Cole had never spoken to her in that tone, never drawn a boundary, never stood on anyone else's side. "Me?" She let out a strained laugh. "I'm worried about your child. Can't you see? Isabella glanced Maya up and down. "Is a cleaner. Poor? A carrier of disease?" Lucas suddenly burrowed into Maya's neck, releasing a tiny whimper. The faint sound was enough to make Nathan step forward. "That's enough," he said, his voice deep and sharp. "Lucas is at peace, and that is the only thing that matters, and from now on, Maya will be Lucas's primary caregiver." Heat flared across Isabella's face, not with embarrassment, but with insult. For the first time, her power had failed her. She looked at Maya again. This time it was not only contempt, it was recognition, a threat. Not because Maya had done anything wrong, but because Maya had accomplished what Isabella never had. As Isabella turned and left the conservatory, her social smile returned to her lips. But deep in her eyes, a cold resolve was being born. In the days that followed, the Cole estate began to change in ways no one had expected. The deadly silence that once smothered every hallway was gradually broken by small but vivid sounds. Lucas's unsteady footsteps on the carpet, the splash of water in plant basins when Maya let him touch the leaves. And sometimes, very rarely, but enough to make hearts tremble, a soft, fragile laugh echoing through spaces that had once known only the ticking of clocks. Maya hardly left Lucas's side. She imposed no rigid schedules, forced nothing. She let him touch soil, water, and the morning sunlight pouring through the tall windows. She spoke to Lucas as she would to a whole human being, not as a case. Nathan observed everything from a distance. He began lingering longer at the breakfast table. The tablet filled with financial reports lay forgotten at his side while he watched Maya patiently feed Lucas, spoon by spoon, making silly faces that coaxed laughter from the boy. Those moments were brief, but they were enough to carve small cracks into the thick ice encasing his heart. And those cracks did not escape Isabella's notice. From the second-floor balcony, Isabella gazed down into the garden through decorative binoculars, an idle accessory for a woman of high society. She saw Maya sitting on the grass, her simple fabric dress stained with a few streaks of dirt, while Lucas toddled toward her, laughing each time he fell into familiar arms. Isabella gripped the binoculars until her knuckles turned white. It was not the sight of childcare that unsettled her. It was the way Nathan stood nearby, hands in his pockets, his gaze softening as he watched the two of them. It was the look Isabella had tried to earn for years, through perfection, status, and control, and had never once succeeded. At breakfast that morning, Isabella had seen something that made her stomach tighten. Nathan smiled, not the polished smile he gave the press, not the detached smile he wore at formal gatherings, but a real smile, brief, fleeting, yet entirely meant for Maya when she accidentally dropped a spoon and flushed with apology. An invisible thread was tightening between them. Isabella lowered the binoculars, her lips pressed into a thin line. She did not allow herself to grow angry. Anger was for the weak. Instead, in her mind, the gears began to turn. Maya was only a temporary error, and every error could be eliminated. Isabella turned away from the balcony, her gaze cold as steel. She now knew exactly what she had to do. The seed of jealousy had been planted, and it was waiting for the day it would sprout into poison. Isabella did not act hastily. She waited, observed, and allowed Maya to grow just confident enough to believe she was safe. That was always how Isabella did things, never attacking head-on, but setting traps and watching her prey walk into them on its own. The next morning, Isabella woke with a cold, decisive resolve. She needed an ending, fast, irreversible. She chose the indoor pool. It was a vast space with a soaring glass ceiling, the deep blue water reflecting light like a mirror. Because of the danger it posed to small children, the area was always kept locked and opened only under supervision. But Isabella had the master key, a privilege of the future lady of the house. She entered while the mansion was still quiet. The soft, steady click of her heels echoed lightly. Isabella stopped at a corner of the marble floor where the corridor opened directly toward the pool's edge. A sharp turn, dangerously easy to slip on if one wasn't careful. From the pocket of her robe, Isabella took out a small, transparent bottle. Industrial cleaning gel. The thick, colorless liquid became nearly invisible when poured onto damp stone. Isabella crouched down, carefully pouring out just enough, then spreading it thin with the tip of her shoe. The marble looked no different than before. Clean, dry, safe, a perfect trap. Perfect. Isabella straightened and regarded her work with cold satisfaction. She knew Maya. That woman always put Lucas before reason. All it would take was the right trigger, and Maya would run, without thinking, without hesitation. Isabella took out her phone and dialed the kitchen's internal line. On the other end, Maya was preparing breakfast for Lucas. The knife slipped from her hand when Isabella's voice exploded through the receiver, panicked to a terrifying degree. "Maya, hurry! Lucas is at the pool!" Isabella screamed. "He crawled out there. He's about to fall into the water." The blood in Maya's veins seemed to freeze. "What?" she gasped, her heart pounding wildly. I just put him in the crib." "There's no time," Isabella shouted. "If you're even 1 second late—" Maya could not hear another word. She bolted out of the kitchen, leaving everything behind. The squeal of rubber soles skidding over stone tore through the quiet halls, her breath coming in ragged bursts. In her mind, there was only one image: Lucas at the pool's edge, about to fall in. At the pool, Isabella stood on the opposite side, both hands covering her mouth, perfectly performing the role of a panicked woman. Near the edge, Lucas was crawling slowly across the floor, confused, but still safe. Isabella had placed him there only seconds earlier. Maya ran toward him. She did not look down at the floor. She only looked at Lucas. And in that exact instant, her foot landed on the invisible slick of marble. Isabella Reed's final trap had succeeded. Maya realized something was wrong only when her right foot slid away as if she had stepped onto ice. It wasn't water. There was no familiar splash, just an unnatural, cold slickness spreading rapidly beneath her sole. Too late. Her body completely lost balance. Her legs flew upward as gravity hurled her backward in an uncontrollable arc. Everything happened in less than a second, yet in that instant, time seemed to tear apart into slow, fragmented pieces. Before Maya's eyes was not the soaring glass ceiling. It was Lucas. He was right there, too close to the pool's edge, too fragile. If she fell with the momentum of her body, she would slide straight forward, collide with Lucas, and that impact would be enough to send the child into the deep, freezing water behind him. Instinct rose faster than fear. Maya did not throw her hands out to protect her head. She did not curl inward to save herself. Instead, she twisted her entire body in a near-reflexive motion, using her shoulder and back to redirect the fall, forcing her body sideways, away from Lucas. "Careful!" she cried, her voice slicing through the air. The next sound was dry and horrific. Crack! Maya's head slammed violently into the marble edge of the decorative pool step. The brutal impact was strong enough to plunge everything into darkness in a blink. Her body fell heavily onto the floor, motionless. Lucas dropped into a seated position on the dry stone, pushed back a few dozen centimeters by Maya's final movement, just enough to pull him away from the pool's edge. He stared at the unmoving woman before him, eyes wide with fear. Ma?" Lucas babbled. There was no answer. A bright red stream of blood began to spread from beneath Maya's head, flowing across the white stone floor, mixing with the invisible gel that still lingered there. Her chest rose and fell faintly, so faint it was almost impossible to see. Across the pool, Isabella slowly lowered her hands from her mouth. The fake panic vanished, revealing a cold, calculating gaze. She had not expected so much blood. She had not expected Maya to be so badly injured. But the result was still what she wanted. "Stupid woman," Isabella muttered softly, so quietly only she could hear. She walked around the slick area, carefully avoiding the gel, then bent down and lifted Lucas into her arms. The child began to cry loudly, reaching back toward the motionless body on the floor. "Shh, shh," Isabella said quickly, her voice already shifting into practiced concern. "She was so careless, she almost got you killed." She pulled out her phone, preparing to call emergency services, already rehearsing the story she would tell. Maya panicked, ran into the pool area, slipped out of carelessness. A tragic accident, an unforgivable negligence. The wail of the ambulance siren tore through the quiet noon, echoing across the grounds of the Cole estate like a sentence being pronounced. When Nathan rushed into the pool area, the sight before him made the blood in his veins seem to freeze. Maya lay motionless on the stone floor, her dark hair matted with blood, her face terrifyingly pale. A vivid red stain spread across the white marble, creating a cruel contrast. Nathan dropped to his knees beside her, not caring that his expensive suit was soaking in blood. "Maya? Maya, look at me," he pleaded, his voice trembling as he cradled her face. "Please, don't fall asleep." Isabella stood behind him, holding Lucas, her voice shaking with panic. She ran in here like a mad woman and slipped. I tried to stop her, but I was too late." Nathan did not answer. His eyes were locked on Maya, searching desperately for any sign of life. When he saw her chest rise faintly, he exhaled as if his own breath had been returned to him. Paramedics quickly lifted Maya onto a stretcher. "Severe head trauma," one of them called out. "We need to transport her immediately." Nathan followed closely, gripping Maya's hand until the ambulance doors slammed shut. In that moment, Lucas suddenly burst into hysterical crying in Isabella's arms, reaching toward the vehicle. "Mama!" The child screamed, his voice hoarse with fear. Nathan turned back, looked at his son, then looked at Isabella. For the first time, blind trust was gone from his eyes. Only heavy suspicion remained. St. Mary's private hospital blazed with cold white light. Maya was rushed straight into surgery. Nathan collapsed onto a plastic chair in the corridor, elbows on his knees, hands trembling. Time dragged on with brutal slowness. Isabella sat beside him, flawless and spotless. "What a tragedy," she whispered. "At least Lucas is safe." Nathan did not reply. 2 hours later, the operating room doors opened. The chief surgeon, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stepped out. "She's out of immediate danger," he said. "Severe concussion, multiple stitches, but no permanent brain damage. She needs monitoring." Nathan closed his eyes and let out a shaking breath. "May I see her?" "Not yet, but—" The doctor hesitated, lowering his voice. "There's something I need to tell you." He led Nathan aside. During the full-body exam to rule out other injuries, we found numerous old marks on her body. Scars on her back, healed cigarette burns on her arms, ribs that show signs of having been fractured and improperly treated. Nathan was stunned. "These injuries are not from accidents," the doctor said slowly. "They indicate a prolonged history of abuse." A few steps away, Isabella overheard fragments of the conversation. Her brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. Nathan felt his throat constrict. The image of Maya, gentle, patient, crashed into his mind. That night, while Maya remained unconscious in the recovery room, Nathan Cole sat alone in the hospital waiting area. Lucas had been taken by his grandmother for care. The world seemed to pause, leaving only Nathan and the questions relentlessly pounding in his mind. Maya was not careless. She had not run blindly, and she would never place his child in danger. The final images at the pool replayed in Nathan's mind like slow-motion film. The bloodstain, Maya's body twisted to one side, and the detail he could not ignore. The marble floor had been completely dry, yet unnaturally slick. Near midnight, Nathan's phone vibrated. "Sir," came the voice of Mr. Harris, head of security, on the other end of the line. "As part of insurance protocol, we secured the pool area to examine the scene. There is something I think you should know." "Report," Nathan replied immediately, his voice low. The marble floor showed traces of an industrial cleaning gel, not standard household chemicals, extremely slick, extremely dangerous. Nathan's heart clenched. "What about the pool cameras?" he asked. There was a brief pause. "The main camera was reported out of order as of yesterday. According to the log, Ms. Isabella Reed signed the maintenance confirmation." Nathan's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. "But," Harris continued, "we have just discovered a newly installed auxiliary camera on the upper corridor, wide angle. It doesn't face the pool directly, but it reflects through the balcony glass." Nathan sprang to his feet. "Send it to me immediately." 10 minutes later, inside the hospital's security room, Nathan opened the encrypted video file. The initial image was blurry and noisy, just a reflection of light on glass. But as the digital enhancement sharpened the image, a familiar silhouette emerged. Isabella. Nathan could clearly see the light-colored dress, the neatly tied blonde hair. She bent down at the exact spot where Maya had slipped. A very familiar motion, pouring a liquid onto the floor. Then she straightened, glanced around, and smiled. A brief smile. Cold, not meant for anyone. The footage continued. Isabella took out her phone and made a call. Seconds later, Maya appeared in the frame, running at full speed, her gaze fixed only on Lucas. Then the slip, the desperate twist, the brutal fall. Nathan closed the video. He did not need to see any more. Every scattered piece had now locked into a single, complete picture, one so revolting it sent a chill through his spine. Nathan closed his eyes and drew in a deep breath. When he opened them again, his gaze had changed completely. There was no more hesitation, no more conflicted emotion. The following morning, the Cole estate was wrapped in a strange atmosphere, so quiet it felt suffocating. News of Maya's accident had spread among the staff, but no one knew the details. They only knew that Nathan Cole had ordered everyone to gather in the grand hall. Isabella sat on a velvet sofa, draped in a silk robe, holding a teacup as if everything were still under her control. She believed she had told a story that was plausible enough. An accident, a careless maid, and a child who had narrowly escaped harm. She did not know that. Nathan had seen everything. The main doors opened. Nathan entered the hall with Mr. Harris and 2 security officers. His face was terrifyingly calm, no rage, no agitation, only the cold composure of a man who already held the ending in his hands. "Thank you all for being here," Nathan said evenly. "What we are addressing today has nothing to do with work. It has to do with the truth." Isabella took a sip of tea. "Nathan, I don't think this is the right time." "Isabella," he cut in. Just one word, but it was enough to freeze the room. Nathan gestured to Harris. The large screen at the far end of the hall lit up. "Before we watch," Nathan continued, his eyes never leaving Isabella, "I want to ask you one question. Do you still maintain that the incident at the pool was caused by Maya's carelessness?" Isabella set down her teacup and offered a thin smile. "Of course. I was there. I saw everything." Nathan nodded slowly. "Good." He snapped his fingers. The video began to play. A deathly silence fell over the room as the reflected footage appeared. Isabella bending down, pouring industrial gel onto the marble floor, straightening up, and a fleeting smile, cold as a blade. Several maids raised their hands to their mouths. Someone drew a sharp breath. The video continued, showing Maya running in, the slip, the desperate twist, and her body collapsing into a pool of blood. Nathan switched off the screen. He turned to Isabella. "Would you like to explain?" Isabella went pale. She sprang to her feet, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep her pride intact. "That's fabricated. Technology can do anything. Someone is framing me." Nathan stepped forward 1 pace. "They tested the gel bottle found in the trash. Your fingerprints are on it." The hall fell into absolute silence. "Do you have anything else you'd like to say?" Nathan asked. Isabella burst out, tears spilling, panic finally breaking through. I only wanted to protect our future," she screamed. "She was taking you away from me, taking Lucas away from me. I didn't mean to kill her." "You did," Nathan said, each word slow and deliberate. "You put my son in mortal danger, and you attempted to kill the woman who saved his life." Isabella trembled, stepping backward. "My father is a senator," she whispered. "You can't." "I can," Nathan cut in. "And I will." He turned to Harris. "Forward all evidence to our attorneys and the district attorney," Nathan ordered. "File charges for attempted murder, tampering with evidence, and endangering a minor." The 2 guards stepped forward. Isabella screamed and struggled as she was dragged toward the doors. "Nathan, I love you!" Nathan did not look at her. He went straight upstairs to the room where his son Lucas was sleeping. He bent down and gently kissed his son's forehead. Hospital room 304 was bathed in the gentle light of late afternoon. The heart monitor released steady, rhythmic beeps, quiet confirmations that Maya was still holding on to this world. She lay there, fragile, her head wrapped in white bandages, her face pale, yet more peaceful than in the days before. Soft white light filtered through her half-closed lashes, making her frown faintly. Her head throbbed dully, heavy, as if someone had placed a cold stone upon her forehead. She shifted slightly. A sharp pain ran from her temple down her neck, drawing a soft groan from her lips. "Maya?" A familiar, low voice sounded very close. She slowly opened her eyes. Nathan was sitting beside her bed, not the image of a cold employer in a flawless suit. His shirt was wrinkled, his hands clasped tightly together, dark circles etched beneath his eyes, the marks of a man who had gone without sleep for many nights. "You're awake," he said softly, as if afraid of shattering the fragile moment. "The doctor said you'll be all right. You frightened me." Maya tried to remember. The pool, the slick floor, Lucas. She lifted her hand in alarm, but the bandages slowed the movement. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Is he okay?" Nathan swallowed. "My son is safe because of you." Maya closed her eyes, a very faint smile forming on her lips. "That's good." That simple gesture, the pure relief, made Nathan's heart tighten. "Isabella has been removed from the house," he continued. "All evidence has been secured. She will never come back to harm you or Lucas." Maya turned her face away, taking a slow breath. I just hope it all ends here. I don't want any more trouble." Nathan nodded. "I promise." 2 days later, Maya was discharged from the hospital. The car did not turn into the staff entrance. It stopped at the main gates of the Cole estate. Maya stepped out in disbelief. All the household staff were lined up on both sides of the driveway. Lucas was being held at the front. When he saw her, he burst into laughter and toddled forward, unsteady but determined. Maya dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms, tears streaming freely down her face. Nathan stood behind her. His voice rang out clearly, meant for everyone to hear. "From today on, Maya Reyes is no longer an employee in this house. She is my partner in raising my son, and she is family." No one objected. 6 months later. The Cole estate was no longer a cold fortress. Laughter echoed through the garden. Lucas ran barefoot across the grass, calling Mama as naturally as breathing. Maya stood there in a simple dress, no rubber gloves, no lowered gaze. Nathan approached, holding a small velvet box in his hand. He knelt down, just like before, in water, in tears, but this time in sunlight. "Maya," he said softly, "you didn't save me with miracles. You saved me with your heart. If you'll allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life becoming worthy of that." Maya looked at Lucas, then at the man who had learned how to love from ruin. "Yes," she whispered. Lucas clapped his hands, laughing brightly. And for the first time in many, many years, the Cole estate truly became a home.